Okay, I think we're live. All right. For those watching on YouTube, we will get this going in a minute. We're going to post some links around and then we'll get the meeting going. Let's see. YouTube link. And I'll post a link in the agenda. Okay, just doing the pre-meeting checklist. Okay, I think we can start. David, do you want to go ahead and kick this off and we'll do some introductions?
I think we should. My name's David R. Allen, and I am the biz dev guy for the Permissionless Software Foundation, and been around for a while. Probably way too long.
I am Chris Troutner. I founded the Permissionless Software Foundation and fullstack.cash. And this is our second or third community meeting. And yeah, I'll leave it at there. Don, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Don Wanton, or I'm known as that online. I'm a general manager over at Ava Labs with the Avalanche chain. And I'm not a founder or anything. I just bought enough tokens to be on the PSF.
And that's appreciated. Austin, how about yourself?
Okay, my mic's working now. Okay, my name is Austin. I'm just a Bitcoin enthusiast, excited about censorship resistance and economic freedom. So,
right on. Good company. Okay, well, with that, let's move into the agenda. I'll go ahead and share my screen. That way we can all kind of stay on top. There's basically 3 discussion items, and these first 2 are going to blend into one another. And a lot of this content is going to be a repeat for the people attending this meeting. But we had a private VIP meeting a few days ago to discuss a lot of these topics. And so with this CommComm meeting, this is a chance to present it to the rest of the PSF community. So one of the perks of getting access to the PSF VIP Telegram room is that we're going to have regular, probably monthly private meetings for people, for PSF community members who have accrued enough merit to gain access to the VIP room. And for those who are totally unfamiliar with what I'm talking about with the VIP room, it's a Telegram channel. There's a bot in there that deletes everything that's written unless you have signed a message proving that you own an address that contains enough PSF tokens of enough age to have a merit score of 30,000. You can go in there and do /help to talk to the bot and find out more information. So this first point is going to be a roundtable. Let me kick it off with just sort of a recap on where we're at, or where the discussion is at today. So we've been doing this governance model for 2 quarters, for 6 months. And that's the governance model that's introduced in the video. When you go to psfoundation.cash, scroll halfway down, there's a video. It talks about our governance model where we do grants, and there's an airdrop, and people who stake their PSF tokens are eligible for the airdrop, and then they essentially cast these funding tokens that they get airdropped in order to signal which projects they want to have worked on. And that model has had some success and it's had some failure. And so this first point talks about development culture, and then the next point we're going to go into the funding. And it's really hard to separate those two because our development culture and our funding are so tightly intertwined. So I actually had a little bit of difficulty trying to separate some of the issues between these two. One of the ways in which the Node.js model that we're transitioning to for governance can address some of the, well, first of all, let me talk about some of the bottlenecks. One of the things that worked really good with our development culture over the last 2 quarters were the discrete bounties. These were like bug fixes and very small, tightly scoped features. Those worked really good because we were able to describe exactly the work that needed to be done and exactly the criteria for success. And then we tagged it with a bounty, and then any random person, developer, was able to come along and claim them and fulfill them. And that worked pretty good. There were exceptions, but that system worked really good. Also, this is where I'm going to kind of confuse our funding model with our development culture, is the airdrop participation worked really good. People really, really liked the airdrop participation. Austin, I appreciated what you said earlier about one nice thing about that system is that you didn't have to identify yourself. If you just held tokens, you'd get these voting tokens and you could participate, and you didn't have to give up any sort of identifying information. And I've had other people echo that sentiment. So those are a couple things that worked really good. A couple things that didn't work so good was this sort of top-down planning approach where we tried to do all the grants up front and spec them out as much as possible. And that was like just a ton of work, especially for me. And then, of course, nothing ever goes according to plan over a 3-month period. And so there was a lot of exception making, and that led to communication issues, trying to inform the rest of the community of what we're doing and why we're doing it, just in the face of changing reality. And also the airdrop kind of led to perverse incentives where what I saw a lot of was people would stake their tokens, get the airdrop, essentially vote on what they wanted worked on, and then immediately cash out of all the tokens that they had staked. And so we'd see these wild gyrations in the peg between the PSF token and Bitcoin Cash, and it led to a lot of speculation. So I felt like that was clearly leading to like a perverse incentive. And so I think so there's been some ongoing discussions. And so where I think the conversation is at this point, there's been a couple blog posts. I linked to them in the agenda here. There was one about the Scrum model for managing software development. And then that feedback from that article I created a second blog post called Towards a Better Funding Model, where I incorporated some of that feedback, and we talked about the different funding models, ways we can do it. And that ultimately led to this private VIP meeting that we had a few days ago. And where I was going with that, was that after getting feedback from the people in the VIP meeting, what was clear to me after that meeting was that people really liked that airdrop model, and the not having to identify yourself that way. And we talked about having this more bottom-up approach where instead of the top-down approach that we've been doing, which is grants every 3 months, this bottom-up approach would be more like a formal application of like, here's the work I'm going to do, here's who's responsible for it, here's the time frame, here's the budget, and then it would lead to more accountability. And I talk about that more in depth in this Towards a Better Funding Model. And the VIP meeting helped refine that into these that we could still have voting for funding projects, and it would involve 2 addresses. And so that would allow yes, no, and abstain. So if you get some tokens proportional to the PSF tokens that you have staked, then you can either vote yes, no, or not voting is abstaining. And so that's a big part of what we talked about in the VIP meeting. I like that. And so let's talk about some of those things I said, both the good and the bad in the development culture, and the good and the bad in terms of this voting top down versus bottoms up, and the sort of voting. I think Don, you're probably hearing a lot of this information for the first time, but I'll just open this up. Do you guys have any comments on any of that?
We talked about giving tokens out based on merit too. I don't know if you've thought about that more, if it's even feasible. I don't know how that would work exactly, but instead of airdropping based on PSF merit instead.
Yeah, it's essentially the same idea. So yeah, thanks. I should clarify that. So in the past, what we did was people had to basically stake their tokens by parking them for 2 months. And then it was that 2-month window, which we can verify by looking at the blockchain, that would determine your eligibility if you got the airdrop voting tokens. Merit is essentially the exact same idea. We're just quantifying that. So, by the day. And so it's really like that concept really doesn't change. So you need 30,000 merit. And for people watching this who don't know what I'm talking about with merit, it's a simple calculation where it's token quantity times the age of those tokens in days. So if you have 1,000 merit or 1,000 tokens, PSF tokens, and they're 1 day old, you have a merit of 1,000. If they're 2 days old, you have a merit of 2,000. So to get into the VIP room is 30,000 merit. So that would be like 15,000 tokens held for 2 days, or 1,000 tokens held for 30 days. Those both would come up to a merit score of 30,000. So that's how you get access to the VIP room. That same threshold could be used to airdrop these voting tokens, proportionate to your merit. And the reason why this is a salient topic is that the end of our last quarter is about to run out, and in a couple weeks, and so we won't have any sort of funding for administrative things like we've been doing, and I think we can go for a while without that. But the sooner we can find some resolution on this and move forward, the better. Quarter, and one of the other big takeaways I got from the VIP meeting in considering all this is that we really need metrics, and that was actually one of the projects we were supposed to work on this quarter that didn't really get the attention that it needed. Is really broad metrics, like what's our income, what are our expenses. Like that would be that's like the first metric I'm thinking that needs to be reported on. And so I'm doing a little research on that in terms of looking at the burn address of the token liquidity app, and maybe doing a monthly report of here's how many tokens went out, and then here's how many tokens got burned. So that's essentially our income and our expenses, and just doing really broad metrics like that. The Node.js Foundation has a concept called KPIs, the key performance indicators, and their CommComm, their community committee uses KPIs to track progress, particularly since they work with a lot of non-technical stuff, a lot of non-quantifiable things. So they come up with these key performance indicators that can be very qualitative. And we might consider doing the same thing, but just as a first step in that direction, I think doing some just really broad metrics of like what is our income, what is our alco, what is our expenses, would be the first. If if I was not in the sort of head janitor role that I'm in, if I was just a member of the VIP room trying to judge whether a project should be funded or not, that would be the first piece of information that I would want to know. And so I'll throw that out there. What do you guys think about that? Is there other metrics that we should like? I think less is more at first, but I'm trying to like think about what are the really strong metrics, like as VIP members who hold tokens, whose token value will be diluted as we fund things. What are the things that you would want to know in order to know that these new tokens being brought into the dilution that you're experiencing is being spent well, and you could consider it as an investment?
I think from my experience, consistent format for reporting. So, on a particular project, if it's reporting every 2 weeks, and there's a form with some room for editorializing, then you get used to whatever that format is, and you also get used to the regularity of it. And I think that's a key, is that people tend to expect they're going to get a report at a certain time, and then they're not disappointed when they don't get it. Now, how complete that report is depends on the project, but I think that's a good way to start things.
Yeah, really good feedback. And that's where my thoughts were tending as well, was maybe have a monthly report, and probably have a monthly private VIP meeting where we share and discuss that report.
Yeah, I'm thinking more about specific projects. Like, for example, one of the things that was discussed before was the use of the software. Measuring how much each part of the software is being used. So, for example, FullStack.cash, there's sort of a broad, maybe the monthly is fine, but if there's a project that's using the software on a weekly basis, and you can see the metric on that. So there'd be varieties of depending on what the project is. So
yeah, I agree. I definitely, and that's an interesting point about like project versus like sort of macro, where to start with, I'm thinking if we look at like the burn address, so when you pay like a FullStack.cash subscription, or you use message.fullstack.cash to send messages, those all result in a little bit of Bitcoin Cash getting sent to burn tokens. And so that directly causes the token to appreciate in value. So I thought, like, broad strokes, that would be a good place to start. But then definitely I hear what you're saying and agree, David, with like it would be great to see the burning of tokens of FullStack.cash versus, say, the wallet.fullstack.cash and message.fullstack.cash, to be able to see sort of the flows from each product, for lack of a better word.
For sure. And then just gives a more complete picture. And then again, the expectation of when things are going to be reported is helpful for everybody that's involved, because they feel like they're being kept up to date on it. Unlike other projects that happen in crypto, where you don't necessarily know what the heck's going on.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of obscurity in this industry, which is ironic considering it's a transparent blockchain.
Exactly.
So one of the sort of problems that I was thinking of after the VIP meeting, because in the VIP meeting we kind of agreed, like, okay, we like this airdrop voting idea based on merit, but we probably don't want to do that for every single application. So just to give an idea of I thought I had an example of let me pull that up. I created just a rough draft example of like a proposal that would be submitted to one of the committees for like a proposed budget for a project. And I will share this link in the Permissionless Software Foundation Telegram room. Example draft proposal. The content of this isn't so important as the idea of like this is an example of a proposal that would be submitted to the committees and then would gain sort of organic momentum and then eventually be voted on for funding. But the problem I see is like we'll probably have half a dozen to a dozen of these each quarter, and so we probably don't want to. And the voting it requires quite a bit of administrative work. So I'm kind of drawing a blank on how to approach this. If it's possible to approach them in a blanket way, or if we really should just ask the VIP members to vote on each proposal as it comes out and just accept that overhead.
From my perspective, you need to have recommendations so that people understand, what the feeling is of the person that's putting it together has on it. So for example, I do some business development, and I'd like to have a budget of X, Y, Z, and I would take that to you. We'd talk about it. We may be talking about it in a public group like this, but in the end, as the head janitor, you're either going to recommend it or you're not. And that's generally the way I think it becomes more obvious, the direction. And if there's a reason not to go ahead with something, then of course that comes up as well.
Yeah. And I get that, especially where we're at right now as a community. We're small enough. The actual looks good to me, go ahead type of thing is pretty easy to pull off. But if we wanted to actually go through the motions and have a vote, I need to think about the actual mechanics and overhead of that. I might be able to refine it into a tool set that's actually very easy to work with. Don, I'm curious, do you have, I know that Ava Labs has a grant system. Do you know much about it and how that would sort of compare and contrast to what we're talking about here?
Yeah, so the grant system is, it's not really on chain or voted on. It's mostly just kind of, you submit a proposal and it's granted on a case by case basis. There isn't any kind of decentralized way it's happening within. So, eventually once the foundation gets off, we'll deal with similar problems of governing on which proposals to vote on. But as of right now, it's pretty much just a classic system. Nothing too much to speak on there as far as comparing to this.
Okay.
I think probably one of the big differences with AVA and with the Permissionless Software Foundation is there isn't a huge bucket of money where things are coming from.
Yeah.
And we didn't do an ICO. We didn't do. Yeah, we're using a model that's a little bit more grassroots, if you were.
Definitely.
People are slowly understanding the value of the PSF, and so they're slowly buying tokens, and they're slowly feeding the liquidity app, which of course allows for people to, start to plan. So we're doing it in a slightly different way. ICOs are great.
Definitely.
The comparison is really difficult.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we're basically funding all development out of pocket. We can kind of borrow from the future by making more tokens, but we always have to answer for that.
Just a quick question, and it might be a little off because going back, you were talking about the way that tokens are airdropped. Right now, is the airdrop is on a one-on-one basis. If you hold 200, PSF tokens, do you get 200 PSF tokens in that? I think, is it quarterly?
Well, so the way we were doing it, that's a great question, Don. The way we were doing it is we were going to airdrop 100,000 funding tokens every quarter, and the amount of tokens that you get in the airdrop would be proportional to the tokens that you have staked, and then that all the tokens that have been staked. So if there's 100,000 tokens that have been staked, you get one token. If there's only 50,000 tokens that have in total that had been staked, then you'd get two. So it would be proportional to the amount of tokens you staked and the amount of tokens everyone else staked.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I'm just trying to like wrap my head around a little bit, and you know, if you did it all based off merit, I guess my worry would be if you based off merit, because you get like the compounding idea of, you know, like every day you get like merit equal to the amount of tokens, but also if you throw in like the airdrop, the incentives to just like holding on to that just like incredibly compounding amount of merit would just be like so high, I would almost never vote.
Oh, well, the voting wouldn't actually impact your merit, but yeah, I mean, that's the thing. This is not a solved problem. We would have to, there's a lot of nuance here, and we'd have to consider how to do that. Because I just described how we used to do it, but I actually haven't spent a whole lot of time thinking about what this new way would look like.
Gotcha.
And hopefully that's an ongoing conversation we can have in the Telegram channel. I very much want to solicit ideas.
Gotcha.
But I like what I mean, this is why I like the merit idea so much, because you're right, it does compound. If you just let your tokens sit, then they accrue. I mean, if you have 1,000 tokens every day, you're getting 1,000 more merit. And that's very much intentional, because the idea is like if a developer in Venezuela, can only afford to put 100 tokens aside, but they're incredibly dedicated, after a year, they should be able, their voice should be on par with someone who, might have just bought 10,000 tokens, but has only been around for a few weeks.
Right. All right. Gotcha.
And then how that translates into voting. Yeah, we need to carefully consider that. Yeah, good question. Good questions. Good things to think about. I don't think we're going to resolve anything in this meeting, but yeah, let's keep.
I'm just thinking out loud, because, like I said, I missed that last meeting, so some of this is it's just going through my head right now.
Yeah. I think I just need to code up some, just an idea, and we can play with it and sort of see. What's really nice is being able to actually pull some of this data off the blockchain and look at it in a spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. And be like, okay, here's all here's all the people that have 30,000 merit or above, and then we can kind of see a graph. Like it'll be, it's always a power law, and so it'll look something like that. And
yeah, no, I'd love to see like a rich list of like tokens versus merit to see, like, if you base it off of either, how they would be distributed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll try to pull up some of that data. I'm starting to really play around with both on the front of the metrics for reporting income and outgo, but also I need to dig into some of these metrics around merit and how we might approach this voting idea. Well, so there's one final agenda item just to discuss onboarding and how we can improve, like just kick around some ideas on how we can grow our community. But before we move on to that, does anybody have any other final thoughts on our development culture and the funding?
I just want to bring up that we did have more or less a private meeting for people that are in the VIP room. And that part of the culture, I think, is really appreciated, because then you get to know people. And you're sort of a little bit free to talk outside the box. Also, I can discuss my dog. But there's a human element to it. And we don't always do that when we go into a formal meeting with a formal business agenda, as we're doing today. I mean, we do have some flexibility. But I think that direct communication, you see people's eyes, you see the way they're reacting to your comments. I think those things are really important in any real culture. It's also kind of interesting that the four of us here today are not using, we're not anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to be somebody else the next time we show up. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, and we talked about that in that VIP meeting, and I am very much trying to find a happy medium between anonymous participation and non-anonymous. So this is my hope, is that we can carve out a space for that with the VIP meetings where they're private and not recorded, and people are a little more free to expose themselves and have their voice heard. And then we take what we learned from that and we bring it back to these kinds of committee meetings, where this committee is representing the community. They are answerable to the members of the VIP meeting, but they formally represent the entire community and culture. And same with the technical steering committee. They represent the technical side of the house, but are also ultimately responsible to the people in the VIP room. And so it's people in the VIP room who can be private, who have space to be private. They're the ones with the economic power. They're the ones that can choose to buy or sell their tokens, and will have the power with the voting tokens to essentially, say yes or no to the ideas that the community, the committees bring to them.
So in the cultural aspect, I think what we're looking at is more of a hybrid between that formality and the informality, which would seem to be more complex, but in reality, it's probably easier.
Yeah, I think so. I really like the way things are shaping up. I mean, we're definitely figuring it out as we go, so we're going to make some mistakes, but
for sure. Hopefully not big ones.
So. Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Okay, well, so this is another roundtable topic just on onboarding. So I'll kick this off with one of the ways that I think was a really positive step towards onboarding people into the community is I participated in the CoinParty hackathon that ended about a week ago, and it was great. My team won the grand prize. But more importantly, we were able to showcase some of the fullstack.cash tool sets. So the game, we built a game, although it's really a merchant onboarding tool called GeoDrop.cash. That's the address, GeoDrop.cash. But what I found out through the course of the hackathon is there was about 5 different teams that ended up using the BCHJS JavaScript library. So I'm in the process of digging a little deeper, talking to those teams, finding out how they used it, what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it, probably showcase their projects on fullstack.cash. So I felt that was really encouraging because that PSF core software that's in our roadmap is really their developer tools. And those hackathons are where the developers are at. And we saw, developers actually using the tools without any sort of prodding or marketing. And I did a little mentoring during the hackathon, and that always goes a long way. I feel like that's the best marketing that I can do is just help developers solve problems using our developer tools. And so it remains to be seen if that will bear fruit. I'm encouraged, but I'm always looking for other ways, particularly that don't involve me directly, where we can onboard other people into the Permissionless Software Foundation. And so I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts, any sort of low-hanging fruit that you can think of in terms of how can we grow our community?
Well, one of the things that I've noticed when people get interested in the projects themselves is that they tend to ask questions. So when somebody has a project that could be using the services and the products that are available through the PSF, giving them a consistent one pager that this is how things work. And we'd love to have you here, make it an invitation, and then tell them what the requirements are to be involved. I think it's, in a sense, it's like just having the material available when you find somebody that has an interest. we've all known Don Wanton for a while. Austin's new to me, but you're still coming into contact with people on a day-to-day basis, and having a consistent message. So that's something that I'd be willing to put some time into, so that we have, just a simple one-pager, 3 paragraphs that, makes people feel welcome, but also explains in an overview how they can be involved and what the benefits are.
Yeah, I love that idea. Like a pamphlet, where we went to Costco and I asked some guy about an air conditioner a question, and he was like, "Well, you know what? I have a pamphlet on that." And he just like here, take this with you. I thought that's pretty smooth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the easiest way. It's a little bit bigger than a business card, but it's for people that have an interest, it's a good way to keep them engaged. And also, again, as the biz dev guy, it's kind of important for me to know who these people are, so that I can reach out to them. Did you read the pamphlet?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to sound religious about it. I don't want to go in that direction, but
well, they are good salesmen.
Yeah, that's true. But we do want to make sure that people can get the right information at the right time. So, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, great input. And one thought I had too, and I'm not exactly sure the right way to approach this, because it's a little taboo, is dark markets or darknet markets. Bitcoin, it's a matter of history, like got its first bull run because of the Silk Road, and the internet started because of porn, and Bitcoin got its first price because of buying drugs. And I think that I don't think that cryptocurrencies should shy away from those use cases in terms of that's what they're good for. They're explicitly good for censorship resistant and things that society would rather censor. And so I'm more inclined to embrace that culturally. And a lot of the tools we are building do speak directly to the needs of the gray market. And but I'm not exactly sure how to go about advertising that, or to find the people who need those tools the most, how to find those people.
I think you're, if permission to speak freely, Captain, I don't have the same interest in the dark markets. Cannabis is legal in Canada, so I'm no longer a criminal. The things that people do in different countries under different laws, it's very, very complex. I think just providing tools for people to communicate, as we do with YouTube, as we do with Zoom, providing the tools and focusing on what you're doing that's productive, and using your own values on it. I know you guys in a reasonable way, and I know that you're probably not axe murderers. At least I'm hoping not. So those are the kind of things where I'm more interested in setting out the productivity aspects rather than where the specific markets are. But that's me,
Well, and that echoes a concern with that. Is just by putting it out there, that's kind of off-putting to a lot of people. So there's definitely, I'm not sure where the balance lies.
Sorry, just to be clear, what do you mean by putting it out there as off-putting?
Oh, just being openly supportive of the gray market, and is off-putting to a lot of people.
So I don't understand why it needs to be identified as a gray market or a dark market or a black or a white market, because really you're talking about communications between humans. And if I want to meet up with a nasty person on a street corner, I guess that's a dark market. But that's my choice to,
right.
I think it's just what are the best ways for people to get the best information so they can make the best decisions, rather than what is the content.
Right.
It's just a different approach, and it's probably because I'm 100 years older than you guys.
No, I agree with you because, and that's really, I mean, you really touched on the point that I want to focus on, which is the gray market. Like if you take a very high level view, you can pretty much look at any economy in any part of the world, and a third of it's going to be the white market, which is like explicitly legal. A third of it's going to be the gray market, which is like, you know, everybody does it, but the legality is questionable. And then there's going to be the black market, which is explicitly illegal. And every economy is just across the world is just roughly split into thirds like that. And so when I talk about the gray market, I'm not talking explicitly about that, but like you said, it's just people trying to, you know, achieve their desires. That's largely what the gray market is. So like in Venezuela, for example, my friend Daniel, his power supply blew out because they have brownouts and blackouts all the time down there. All the stores are shut down because of COVID. He was able to line up a new power supply for his computer in a couple hours just through the informal network of that they've had to adopt down there. And
sure.
And so that's an example of the gray market. It's not anything that's shady.
Yeah, exactly. So I grow potatoes in my yard, and the supermarket down the street didn't have any potatoes. So my neighbor comes to me and says, "Hey, I'd like some of your potatoes." And I can say, "Well, they're not approved by Health Canada," but I mean, is that a gray market?
Yes.
And really, what it boils down to is communications between people, and people looking to get the things that they want or need. And I think that's what we're talking about, is the communication aspect. I'm also not clear that it is broken down into a third, and a third. And you might have some statistics around that. My experience has been that most of the people that I know are pretty straightforward in real life, not necessarily online. And they're pretty straightforward, and this is what I need, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm going to talk about. So maybe there are stats that say it's a third, but I don't see it in my life.
Okay.
To piggyback off of what David's saying, I don't think we need to explicitly market to gray markets or black markets. Bitcoin was never explicitly marketed to the dark nets. It just was fundamentally useful for that. I think the PSF, just by making useful tools, entrepreneurs are going to come along and solve problems in those gray markets and black markets without us needing to, market, advertise. The entrepreneurs will handle that for us if we just build tools, basically, I think.
I think you might be right about it from another perspective too. I mean, one of the groups that's using PSF right now, or the fullstack.cash stuff right now, works in a very straight, even-keeled business environment, and there's no reason for them to even think outside the box about gray or black markets, because that's not part of what they're doing. And yet they're innovative. They provide value to what we're doing. We provide value to what they're doing. So I think, again, I'll reiterate that. As Austin says, it's about the communication piece much more than it is about what the specific markets are. And Chris, you and I might disagree on that, and that's okay too.
I'd like to hear a little bit more, Chris, about what you mean by marketing certain services towards that bend, because I mean, like any good crypto enthusiast, years ago, I haven't been in a while, get myself make a tails and then log on and check out the markets and everything on that side of the internet. Like, what kind of services are you imagining in the first place? Because I don't imagine people using like the PSF token as any kind of payment. Are you talking about for like file storage or for like encrypted messaging? I'd like to know like what kind of tools you're talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, all this stuff ties in together, and I think what Austin just said was an excellent and eloquent summary of all that. And there really is no difference here between what David's talking about and what I'm talking about. That I go back to that example of Daniel getting the power supply in Venezuela. That's very much what I mean when I say gray market. And so to further embellish on that story, Venezuela is a socialism, and so the government has their hands in every single thing, and there's a lot of corruption. it's very hard to do legitimate business in Venezuela. And so the result of that, just natural human desire, which is to do trade and thus create value and thus feed yourself, is if you can't do it legitimately, then you have to do it illegitimately. And so that's why I put a big emphasis on privacy and censorship resistance. I think that I'm very, if merchants can't freely, if people can't trade freely and openly, then they need to trade privately. And so that's why I have a big emphasis on end-to-end encrypted communication and uncensorable publishing. And I think that is just naturally where everything will go if with say like to use the deplatforming as a concept, you're not going to stop people from saying the things that they want to say. You can deplatform them, but they're just going to go say it somewhere else. And I want to be the person providing the tools to give people a voice. I believe that the answer to bad speech is more speech, not to prevent speech. And so I think that everybody should have a voice, and that no government or entity should be able to get in front of that. So that's my personal motivation. And then I think that just naturally leads into what David was saying about, people just naturally wanting to do what they want to do, and they're going to pick the most appropriate tool to do that.
Yeah, and I think you also have the potential for a wider audience if you're focused on positive stuff. And everybody has their own version of positive. And I really like that. I'm just going to say, I really like certain things about certain people. So if I do that and I can say that, that's great. If I'm prohibited from saying something like that, then I'll find another way that I can get the message out.
Yeah, so that's the balance. Like, that's the way that you can put these ideas, a real positive spin on these ideas. Where it starts to get off-putting is when you take it to the extreme, and darknet markets are that extreme. They're operating in a very antagonistic environment. They need to take OPSEC very seriously, and so as an engineer, I tend to think about extremes. Like, if you build a bridge, you think about the extremes.
Yeah, and yes, and I guess maybe that's maybe where the difference is. My relationship with the world has been not as an engineer, but as somebody that bridges between engineering and marketing. And so I'm going to try and see things. I'll try and see things in a different way than an engineer will, on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And that's good. But I can hear what you're saying. I appreciate it, and I look at what Don's doing with marketing, with his work, and I could really appreciate that. I don't think I could do it, but if I can get the two of you to agree to something that I'm doing, then I'm building some bridges. And I think the PSF is in fact very much a bridge builder for developers. But as we expand into other areas, we become more of a tool that other people will advertise for us about what we're doing.
Did that answer your question, Don? Did I scratch your itch there?
In a roundabout way, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, so here's another thing that I think will help kind of shape the contours of what I'm talking about. The interplanetary file system, I was attracted to it very early on, the same way I was attracted to Bitcoin very early on. And but one of the sort of battle stories that I love using when I'm trying to tell people to emphasize the usefulness of IPFS was the referendum in Catalonia in Spain, where Catalonia is, I'm going to mess this up because I'm not Spanish and I don't know Spanish history, but they're essentially like a state within Spain, and they wanted to secede from Spain and become their own country. And the Spanish authorities said that that was illegal and they couldn't do it. And so in this antagonistic environment, trying to foster a democratic vote, Catalonia ended up using IPFS to pass around the voting pamphlet and all the information. And it was one of the first sort of uses of IPFS at that sort of level, both in terms of the antagonistic and at a state level. And it was really interesting because you've got two different state actors and using technology against one another. And the Catalonian government was successful in passing on this information to its citizens, and having, I don't know if the vote ever took place, but they were actually able to successfully get the information out to the citizens. The Spanish government was not successful in stopping it. However, they did arrest all of the Catalonian government officials and put them in jail. So not a clear win, but I thought it was fascinating that, here this is a very gray area. There are no good guys and bad guys in this story. There's just people trying to do what they're trying to do. And IPFS was their tool of choice for circumventing a better equipped opponent.
I look at the IPFS as a similar way to the printing press, because what happened, I don't want to go through all the history, but once the printing press came along, all of a sudden the common person was getting the same message as royalty. And then, whether it was to take down a government or whether it was to build up some project, that's where the tool was not. The medium was not the message. It was basically just an opportunity for people to communicate better. So that's what I've always been excited about with the internet since 1969, is that it has the ability to allow people to make their own decisions based on getting the best information. And I think that's what you're talking about too with the IPFS. I don't necessarily want to go looking for an IPS file that has no interest to me. But if there's something that'll help me in my work, in my day-to-day life, then knowing that it's there, knowing how to go about getting it, I think that's important.
Yeah, agreed. Well, let's bring this back around, wrap up this final point here. Given all that rabbit trails we went down, does anybody see any obvious low-hanging fruit that we as a committee could focus on in terms of growing our community and encouraging people to check out the PSF and learn more about it?
I watched what your team did at the hackathon, and I was absolutely amazed. And knowing that there were 4 other groups or 5 other groups that were using the tools of the PSF, I think that that's an obvious one to me, to find people that are doing similar things that might want to use it, or people that are using products or services that are failing. And we hear about things now and again, hobby projects that aren't being kept up. And so there's an opportunity to go and say, hey, have you considered this? And again, that 1-page pamphlet, I think, would go a long way.
Yeah.
So to me, that's the low-hanging fruit. Also, as the involvement from outside people in the community, there will be referrals. And having a referral system that makes sense with the right incentives, I think, is a really good idea as well. I want to make a joke now, but I can't.
No, that's great feedback. I totally agree.
Okay.
Totally agree. Okay, guys. Well, I think we can wrap this up. Is there anything else that anybody wants to put out there?
I think that's it for me.
Yeah, I just had one sort of final remark, and that is that if you haven't seen the videos that from the hackathon, I recommend it. Just the stuff that went on there, that Bitcoin Unlimited sponsored this thing, and the prizes were great, and it looked like people had a lot of fun. And hey, I'm not a big fan of a particular chain, but I really had a good time learning about it and watching it. So
Yeah, it was definitely one of the better hackathons that I've seen executed in the last couple years.
yeah, so maybe we'll put I don't know if you can do this afterwards, Chris, but put a link to the various different things that went on there in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll throw a few links in this agenda and on the YouTube comments.
Great, thanks.
All right, well, Austin, Don, I really appreciate you guys taking the time for this. David's retired, so I know he has nothing better to do.
Nice one.
All right, guys. Well, I'll wrap this up with that. And again, I appreciate it. We'll have another CommComm meeting in 2 weeks.
Great.
Looking forward to it. Later, everyone.